You know that moment when someone's prejudice slaps you in the face so hard you actually feel your soul leave your body? Well, 3 weeks ago, my manager did exactly that. And today? He's standing in my office, red-faced and screaming about a cancelled contract worth $500,000. Let me back up. I'm Jody Goodson, and I've been a senior account manager at York Technologies for 4 years. 4 years of building relationships, closing deals, and speaking 3 languages fluently: English, Spanish, and French. My parents immigrated from Guatemala when I was 2, and yes, I know that my name sounds nothing of Spanish descent, but that's a story for another day. I have what some people call an accent. It's subtle but noticeable, but it's there. It's part of who I am. Growing up in Phoenix, I learned early that being different wasn't always easy. Kids at school would ask me to say something in Spanish, like I was a performing monkey. Teachers would speak slower to me, assuming I didn't understand, even though I was consistently at the top of my class. But my parents taught me something valuable: Mija, your voice carries the strength of 2 worlds. Never let anyone make you smaller because of it. I thought it was part of what made me good at my job, actually. Clients loved my warmth, my ability to connect across cultural barriers. My track record spoke for itself. I had the highest retention rate in our division. Just last year, I closed a deal with a Brazilian tech startup specifically because I could communicate with their executives in both English and Spanish, understanding cultural nuances that my colleagues missed entirely. The client told me later that they almost went with our competitor until they met me. That's what made Trevor's words cut so deep. This wasn't just about business, it was about everything I'd fought against my entire life. Until 3 weeks ago. I was preparing for the biggest call of my career. Hartwell Industries, a Fortune 500 company looking to overhaul their entire IT infrastructure. 6 months of relationship building, late nights crafting the perfect proposal, understanding their pain points better than they understood them themselves. The contract was worth $500,000, and it was mine. Let me paint you a picture of how much work went into this. I'd spent countless hours researching every executive at Hartwell, learning their backgrounds, their challenges, their communication styles. I knew that their CTO, Michael Roberts, was a coffee enthusiast who appreciated direct communication. I knew their CFO, Linda Park, was data-driven and needed every number justified 3 ways. I knew their CEO, Thomas Hartwell III, valued innovation but was cautious about change, a delicate balance that required finesse. I'd created detailed personas for each decision-maker, crafted talking points that spoke directly to their priorities, and even prepared for potential objections based on their company's previous vendor relationships. My proposal wasn't just a document, it was a roadmap that showed I understood their business better than they did. I'd built relationships with their staff too. Their IT director, Kevin, and I had bonded over our shared experience of managing complex migrations. Their project coordinator, Angela, appreciated my attention to detail and responsiveness. These weren't just professional connections, they were genuine relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. The night before the call, I stayed until 10 p.m., rehearsing every section, timing every transition, making sure I could answer any technical question they might throw at me. I went home feeling confident, excited even. This was my moment to shine. My manager replaced me on the client call. "He has a better accent for this market," he said. I just nodded and walked away. 3 weeks later, he burst into my office yelling, "Why did they cancel the contract?" 2 hours before the call, my manager, Trevor, knocked on my office door. He's one of those guys who wears expensive suits but still looks like he slept in them, you know? Always fidgeting with his tie, always looking slightly uncomfortable in his own skin. Trevor's the kind of manager who takes credit for your successes and blames you for his failures. He'd been at York Technologies for 7 years, riding on mediocre performance and what he called executive presence, which, as far as I could tell, meant being tall, well-groomed, and speaking with what he considered the right accent. "Jody, we need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. I looked up from my notes, my heart already sinking. Nothing good ever starts with "we need to talk." "I'm taking point on the Hartwell call," he announced, not even sitting down. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Hartwell call. I'll be leading it." My mouth went dry. "Trevor, I've been working on this account for 6 months. I know every detail of their operation, every decision maker, every—" I know. He waved his hand dismissively. But here's the thing, Jody. Hartwell Industries is, well, they're a very traditional company. Very American. Very conservative. He paused, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. I think it would be better if someone with a more neutral accent handled this one. The words hit me like ice water. A neutral accent? You know what I mean. Someone who sounds more local. More familiar to their market. I stared at him. This man, who couldn't pronounce infrastructure correctly if his life depended on it, was telling me that my accent, the one that came from speaking multiple languages, from understanding diverse markets, wasn't good enough for their market. Trevor, I said slowly, I've closed deals with companies 3 times the size of Hartwell. My accent has never been an issue. Look, it's not personal. It's just business. We want to give ourselves the best chance of success here. The best chance of success. As if my 6 months of work, my proven track record, my deep understanding of the client meant nothing compared to the way I pronounced certain vowels. The thing with Trevor is, you never know whether he is stupid or just stupid for the sake of it. I should have fought back. I should have marched to HR, should have demanded explanations, should have stood up for myself. Instead, I just nodded. I nodded and walked away, carrying my carefully prepared presentation materials back to my desk like a defeated soldier. You want to know what the worst part was? The silence. The way conversation stopped when I walked by. The way my colleagues suddenly found their keyboards fascinating when I entered the break room. Everyone knew. Everyone saw. And everyone pretended it was normal. Look, the thing is I don't mind getting snowballed for genuinely good reasons, but this is just weird. Does stuff like this even happen anywhere? Am I part of a Shakespearean tragedy or what? My teammate Lisa, who I'd mentored when she started 2 years ago, couldn't even look me in the eye. I'm sorry, Jody, she whispered as she passed my desk. This isn't right. But sorry doesn't pay bills. Sorry doesn't undo humiliation. Sorry doesn't restore your faith in a company you thought valued merit over prejudice. I called my mom that night, something I rarely did about work problems. She listened quietly as I explained what happened, her silence speaking volumes. Mija, she finally said, her voice heavy with the pain I recognized. I cleaned offices for 20 years so you could have a career where your mind mattered more than your accent. But some battles. She paused. Some battles you have to fight differently. What do you mean? Sometimes the best way to show someone their mistake is to let them make it completely. I didn't understand then. But I do now. I watched Trevor fumble through my presentation during the call. I sat in the back of the conference room, invisible, while he mispronounced the client's CEO's name, twice, and confused their quarterly projections with their annual ones. I watched him sweat through his shirt as he tried to answer technical questions I could have fielded in my sleep. It was painful to watch. When Michael Roberts asked about cloud migration strategies, Trevor stumbled through buzzwords without understanding their meaning. When Linda Park questioned our cost projections, Trevor looked at me desperately, but I just stared back with a neutral expression. When Thomas Hartwell III asked about our experience with companies in their sector, Trevor gave a generic response that showed he'd never bothered to research their specific industry challenges. The worst moment came when Angela, the project coordinator I'd built such a strong relationship with, asked directly, "Where's Jody?" I was expecting to work with her on this transition. Trevor's face turned crimson. Oh, she's supporting the project from a technical standpoint. But I'll be your main point of contact moving forward. I watched Angela's expression change, confusion, then disappointment, then something that looked like understanding. She'd worked with enough vendors to recognize corporate politics when she saw it. The call ended with polite but lukewarm responses from the Hartwell team. No enthusiasm, no excitement, just professional courtesy. I'd seen this before, it was the sound of a deal dying a slow death. But I stayed quiet. I stayed professional. I even helped him afterward, going over the points he'd missed, the connections he'd failed to make. I told him about the relationships I'd built, the personal touches that mattered to each executive, the follow-up strategies that would be crucial. Thanks, Jody, he said, loosening his tie. I think it went well. I nodded. What else could I do? What I didn't tell him was that I'd started updating my resume that very afternoon. What I didn't tell him was that I'd already reached out to 2 headhunters, both of whom were excited about my track record. What I didn't tell him was that I'd lost faith in York Technologies as a company that valued its employees equally. For 3 weeks, I waited. I watched Trevor puff up with confidence, already planning how to spend his commission. I watched him take credit for the groundwork I'd laid, the relationships I'd built. I watched him schedule follow-up calls with my contacts, using my research, my insights. During this time, I did something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every instance where Trevor took credit for my work. I wasn't sure why I was doing it, but some instinct told me I'd need it later. I also started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored. How often Trevor interrupted women in meetings. How he consistently mispronounced our Japanese client's name, even after being corrected multiple times. How he'd made similar comments about our Indian contractor's thick accent being hard to understand during video calls. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. During our weekly team meeting, our colleague Amanda made a pointed comment about inclusive communication that everyone understood but no one acknowledged directly. Our newest hire, Jordan, fresh out of college with his idealistic views about corporate equality, kept shooting me sympathetic glances that I pretended not to see. The silence was deafening. Everyone knew what had happened was wrong, but no one wanted to be the first to call it out. That's corporate culture for you. We'll put diversity and inclusion on our website, but when it comes to actually standing up for those values, everyone suddenly becomes very interested in their quarterly reports. I spent those 3 weeks doing excellent work on my other accounts, closing smaller deals with precision and care. I was proving a point to myself as much as anyone else, that my value wasn't diminished by one person's prejudice. But I'll be honest, it was exhausting. Every day felt like I was carrying extra weight, the weight of having to prove myself over and over again. And then today happened. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Trevor burst into my office. No knock, no announcement. Just pure, unfiltered panic. Why did they cancel the contract? He screamed, his face the color of a ripe tomato. I looked up slowly from my computer. I'm sorry? Hartwell. They canceled. The whole deal is off. He was pacing now, hands shaking. They said. He stopped, his voice cracking. They said they didn't feel we understood their needs. That we seemed disconnected from their values. I leaned back in my chair. Disconnected from their values? They specifically mentioned the presentation. Said it felt cold. Impersonal. Like we were just reading from a script. I almost laughed. Of course it felt like reading from a script. It was my script, delivered by someone who had never bothered to understand the story behind it. Did they say anything else? I asked, my voice steady. Trevor slumped against my doorframe. They said they were looking for a partner who could truly understand their company culture. Someone who could bridge different perspectives and bring fresh insights to their challenges. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Everything they wanted, cultural understanding, fresh perspectives, the ability to bridge differences, was exactly what Trevor thought my accent would prevent me from delivering. I don't understand, he continued, his voice getting higher. The proposal was solid. The numbers were right. Everything was perfect. Everything except the person delivering it, I said quietly. He looked at me sharply. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, full of people with different voices, different stories, different accents. All of them valuable. All of them worthy. Trevor, I said, turning back to him, you took me off that call because you thought my accent would be a problem. But here's what you didn't understand, my accent isn't a liability. It's proof that I can navigate different worlds, that I can connect with people from all backgrounds, that I don't just talk about diversity, I live it. His mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Hartwell Industries doesn't just serve one market, I continued. They're global. They needed someone who could understand complexity, not someone who sounds like he's never left his hometown. But I thought. You thought wrong. I moved back to my desk, pulling out a folder. You want to know why they really canceled? Because authenticity matters. Because when you're building a $500,000 partnership, companies can tell when you're genuine and when you're just performing. I handed him the folder. These are my notes from the 6 months I spent building that relationship. Every conversation, every insight, every moment of connection. Maybe next time, you'll remember that success isn't about how you sound, it's about how well you listen. Trevor stood there, clutching the folder, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Jody, I didn't mean. Yes, you did. I sat back down, turning to my computer. You absolutely did mean it. But now you know what it cost us. As he walked away, shoulders slumped, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed, yes. Frustrated, absolutely. But not angry. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting someone's prejudice collapse under the weight of its own ignorance. But this story doesn't end there. The next day, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Hartwell III himself. Ms. Goodson, he said, his voice warm and direct, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. I got your number from Angela. My heart skipped. Of course not, Mr. Hartwell. How can I help you? I wanted to discuss something with you. After our recent presentation, my team and I were disappointed. We felt like we were dealing with a different company entirely from the one that had impressed us so much during the preliminary discussions. I chose my words carefully. I understand your concerns. The thing is, Ms. Goodson, Angela mentioned that you'd been the primary contact throughout our initial conversations. She said you were the one who truly understood our needs, who'd done the deep research into our challenges. I was quiet for a moment. That's correct. Then can you help me understand why you weren't leading the presentation? Why we were suddenly dealing with someone who seemed unfamiliar with our company's specific situation? This was it. The moment where I could either maintain professional discretion or tell the truth. I thought about my mother's words, about battles fought differently. Mr. Hartwell, I believe there may have been some internal miscommunication about the best approach for your account. Sometimes management decisions are made that don't fully consider the client relationship dynamics. There was a long pause. I see. Well, Ms. Goodson, I'm calling because Hartwell Industries believes in working with people who understand our business. We're not interested in generic solutions or corporate politics. We want authentic partnerships. My pulse quickened. I completely understand that philosophy. Good. Because I'd like to offer you something. We've decided to move forward with our IT infrastructure overhaul, but we want to work directly with you. Not as a York Technologies employee, but as an independent consultant. We're prepared to offer you a contract for $650,000, that's 30% more than your company's original proposal. I nearly dropped the phone. That's very generous, Mr. Hartwell. It's not generous, Ms. Goodson. It's smart business. We want to work with someone who respects our company culture and understands that success comes from authentic relationships, not from playing politics with who has the right accent. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same accent that Trevor thought would cost us the deal had actually earned their respect and trust. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Hartwell. May I have some time to consider it? Of course. But don't take too long. We're eager to move forward with someone we can trust. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the city. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How was your day, Mija? I smiled as I typed back. I think I'm about to fight that battle differently. 3 weeks later, I'm still here. Still working. Still speaking with my accent that supposedly wasn't good enough for their market. And Trevor? He's explaining to the executives why York Technologies just lost the biggest deal of the quarter, and why their best account manager is considering leaving for a better opportunity. The executive team called me into a meeting yesterday. They wanted to discuss the situation and explore options for moving forward. Translation, they realized they'd made a massive mistake and were scrambling to fix it. Jody, said our VP of Sales, Amanda Foster, we've heard there might be some concerns about recent project assignments. I looked around the conference room at faces that had suddenly become very interested in supporting me. I wouldn't call them concerns. I'd call them learning opportunities. We want you to know that York Technologies values diversity and inclusion, continued Amanda. And we're committed to ensuring all our employees feel supported and respected. I appreciate that, I said calmly. I'm sure Trevor will be relieved to hear about the company's renewed commitment to these values. The uncomfortable silence that followed was worth every moment of the past 3 weeks. Here's what I want you to remember, your voice matters. Your perspective matters. Your accent, your background, your different way of seeing the world, these aren't obstacles to overcome. They're strengths to celebrate. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Because in the end, authenticity always wins. It might take time, it might be painful, but it always wins. What about you? Have you ever been told your voice wasn't quite right for something? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your story.